Trip of a lifetime. Let's fucking go. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. I have officially done it. I've created the illest podcasting setup in the history of the universe. I make a lot of bold claims about the history of the universe on this podcast. I've said to have met the most insufferable people in the history of the universe. I've said to have been trapped in the most unbearable conversations in the history of the universe. And I've said to have gotten into it with the most ridiculous human beings in the history of the universe. None of it's verifiable, but this is a concrete universal fact. Mark it down on ancient tablets. This right here, what you're right now looking at, is the illest podcasting setup in the history of the universe. That right there, When Reality Meets Perception, is the name of my first album. Trip of a Lifetime is my second album. And then Path of Destiny is like a major concept, and it's kind of like my third album. These are my two Trip of a Lifetime mixtapes. If I ever get to Rogan and then to DJ Premier, I have a song called Path of Destiny, which I'm only recording if I get to DJ Premier. But if I get to Premier, then all my mixtape verses, which are basically over Premier beats anyway, I would see if he's interested in turning them into like an actual album with like real Premier beats. But I mean, I gotta go one step at a time, but that's ultimately the goal. But the concepts tie together because on this trip of a lifetime, I'm walking my path of destiny. And then the concept really came to life when I went through the manic episodes, because then I was like convinced I'm on like my path of destiny from God, you know what I mean? Like I'm convinced that like the universe has me on a higher path of destiny, you know what I mean? It was all to lead me to those moments where I was supposed to have those remarkable spiritual moments. And then what else? Oh, and then I got the Mr. Sternworm content creator nameplate. I figure I want to keep it formal when I do podcasting, and I'm going to go by Mr. Sternworm, so people put some respect on my name. The other thing I got was this little mushroom thing right here. I thought this was like really cool. I was able to get this personalized, like Trip of a Lifetime, but I mean, I think you guys get it. My whole brand is Trip of a Lifetime. I didn't need it here. It was like gaudy. I thought that like this looks better without it. And then it's this little like mushroom gnome that I've had for a while. And I also have another When Reality Meets Perception wooden thing so I could swap it out. And then I have another Mr. Sternworm content creator nameplate so I could switch it up every once in a while. So I could always get my... Oh, fuck. Motherfucker, man. But I thought I sucked at everything in life until I started putting together a podcasting setup, and then I realized I fucking mastered the art of that. Maybe now if I could just put together some decent content, I'll start to get some viewership. But I just can't help myself but talk about bullshit, like how I saw king crab legs the other day in HEB for $65 a pound. I know king crab is expensive, but that's like over the top and borderline offensive. I've noticed they've since gone down to like $35 a pound, but I swear I saw what I saw, unless I went crazy again. And it's one thing to go to like a nice seafood restaurant and the menu says like market price for the king crab, and you ask how much it is and the server says $65 a pound. That like makes sense to me. You're paying for the ambience, the cost of running a business, and they're gonna present it nicely with signs. But you're at the supermarket and they're just like throwing that shit in a bag for you. Like, I can't believe they have the audacity to charge $65 a pound for that shit. I don't care how much money you have. Like, you can't possibly rationalize adding a $65 pound of king crab legs to your cart when you go out to do your weekly grocery shopping. Insult to injury is the snow crab legs were right next to it on sale for $7 a pound. Like, how bougie and stupid rich do you have to be to opt for the king crab legs in that situation? I'm not gonna lie though, if I was Rogan and like I had like stupid money, I would just do it every once in a while, just like crack myself up like, yeah, give me 2 pounds of the king crab. King crab actually is banging as fuck. I wonder if the king crabs like know how banging they taste. You know what I mean? Like, if I was a king crab and I knew I tasted that good, I'd always be nervous as fuck. Like, yo, everything wants to eat me. It's like a bad roll of the dice when you taste that good. So pub crawlers are back out on the street. Very exciting. Who doesn't love a good pub crawler? I saw a bumper sticker on the back of one of them the other day saying now hiring. I'd rather be fucking homeless than drive one of those things. If you're unfamiliar with what the pub crawlers are, it's like a party on wheels. They're foot pedal carts that ride in the actual street. You like rent them out and like they provide a driver, and there's like 12 seats and they all like each seat has foot pedals, so like the passengers move the cart, but like the driver like I guess steers in the ship. They drive in the middle of the street, so they're fucking annoying as shit. Like, you gotta go around them, but like the passengers could obviously drink on these things, so they're like a party party on wheels. They're blasting music the whole time. Bachelor and bachelorette parties, love them, especially bachelorette parties, but like both types of parties. But like it's usually filled up with like chicks doing like the basic white girl thing that they do, like, oh yeah, whoa. When they're hot, it's sexy, but like when they're ugly as fuck, it's like disgusting as hell. When we were growing up and they would say like looks don't matter, they were definitely lying to us. Looks totally matter. Life is a lot smoother for you if you're attractive. Specifically if you're a girl, like looks really matter if you're a girl. But as tough of work as it must be to drive one of the pub crawlers, I could kick it up one notch. In Austin, Texas, we have the most difficult job in the history of the universe. It's called Karaoke Cab. I think the name says it all. Anyone who prays on a consistent basis, please remember to keep the karaoke cab drivers in Austin, Texas in your prayers. Season down here is starting up and they need your prayers now more than ever. And I was actually thinking about killing myself recently. Figure this is a perfect time to get into it. I was doing a delivery the other day, and it was from some fast food taco restaurant. I forget which one. We have a few of them down here. It wasn't like Taco Bell or nothing. And when I was picking up the food, the employee asked me to call up the customer because they were out of rice and they needed to find out what they wanted to substitute it with. Like, first off, it's undoubtedly the most ridiculous shit in the history of the universe that these restaurants don't have a means to communicate with their customer if need be. Why the fuck is it on me to call the customer to find out what they want to substitute? I'm the fucking third-party delivery service. I'm not trained on the menus in these restaurants. I'm supposed to just fucking pick up the bag. It's usually sealed, so it's not even my responsibility to check the orders. And it could have been taken care of if they had a means to talk directly to the customer instead of waiting for the fucking third-party delivery driver to arrive and call the customer. It's the stupidest shit in the fucking history of the universe that the driver's the one that's fucking supposed to do this shit. But the situation that had me on the edge of suicide, it went down like this. Like I said, it was in a taco fast food chain. The guy told me to contact the customer for a substitution because they were out of rice. He goes, I'd give them double beans, but it was no beans, double rice. So I was like, okay, so what's the closest substitution to rice? The guy goes, guacamole or queso? I thought that was like the moment for me. I started to think of the easiest way that I could fucking kill myself. But then I realized it's not my headache. I just fucking canceled the order and moved on. And now I'll let somebody else deal with that fucking bullshit. So I saw something the other day that I don't ever see. And it's shocking when you see it. I figure it has to happen because I see garbage all over the place. But I saw somebody unremorsefully litter. And it wasn't like there's nowhere to throw this. Fuck it, I don't feel like carrying it with me. They threw it out of their fucking car window. It was like leftovers from their lunch, like paper from a sandwich and empty chips wrappers and like an empty 20-ounce bottle. They just tossed that shit out of the car window. Think about that shit next time you think that there's hope for humanity. And it's something I made note to talk about like 1,000 different times on this podcast. I jot it down every time it happens, but I just never get around to it because like it's just so pointless that I never actually added to the episode. But it's funny because Rogan just mentioned on his podcast that it's something his neighbor does and he thinks it's hilarious, as do I. It seems like this is extremely prevalent when I'm doing deliveries on like a Saturday or Sunday morning. And like it's funny because it just happened to me today when I was doing a delivery. It's not Saturday today. I don't know what day is today. When you don't fucking do anything productive, the days blend together. Oh, today's Tuesday. But like I'll be on a residential street and like I'll drive by somebody who's like walking their dog or some shit. And they wave at me. Like, the first time it happened, it caught me off guard. Like, what the fuck are they waving at? But I've just come to realize it's just something that people do. They'd wave at cars that drive by their neighborhood. Like, we're in a small town in the 1980s. But, like, I thought about, like, these people must wave at every car if they're fucking waving at me. And Rogan was just cracking up on his podcast because some guy on his block does it. And he said that the guy waves at every single car that passes by when he's, like, out front, like, mowing his lawn or whatever. And like I could see this guy waving out Rogan every time Rogan passes because they're neighbors. But like I don't understand why the fuck they wave at people like me. You know what I mean? That's why it catches me off guard. Like I'm the fucking Uber Eats driver. Why the fuck are you waving at me? But like what I've learned in life is like a lot of people are just an extension of what they were. Like I said, it's something you'd expect in a small town in the 80s. But these people have probably been doing that shit since Austin was a small town in the 80s and they just like never stopped. It's like nobody gave them the memo that currency's about to collapse and the aliens are probably here. But I believe Rogan mentioned that on his podcast with Dr. Phil. My takeaway from listening to the Dr. Phil episode is this. People talk about how sports serves as a distraction to society, and I agree that it is. Like, sports definitely is a distraction, but something that I've been noticed, and that conversation validated it, is I personally think over-obsessing over fringe social issues is the biggest distraction in our country. It can absolutely consume people, and it sounds like the woke mafia has eaten Dr. Phil's soul alive. They got him sounding like a crazy old man obsessed with what language is and isn't politically correct. He was like hung up on what you're allowed to currently say in today's day and age. And he was like, did you know you can't even say hip hip hooray anymore because it's offensive to people with hip problems? Like, at what point are we just reaching and overanalyzing one article that was printed as clickbait in some like underground extremist publication? But like, in my opinion, undoubtedly, the number one social issue that serves as a distraction is something that they talked a lot about on that podcast episode, which is transgender children and athletes. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't think it's as prevalent as Rogan makes it out to be. In my universe, nobody I know is transitioning their kids, and nobody I know thinks that a boy should be able to get a sex change and compete athletically against girls. And I know he just had the one girl on who was like a victim of this situation. Like, I don't doubt that it happens, but Rogan could find a few people who are victims of it. But like, honestly, the people who should be called into question are the people in leadership roles who allowed it to happen. But generally speaking, like, I just think it's a small wave pushed by some very sick people, like in terms of trans athlete rights, you know what I mean? Like, whatever the fuck that means. But like, people who push that shit, like, it's just a very sick group of people, and like, social commentators feed into it and they give it life, and then next thing you know, people are able to build careers off of the back of fighting for the rights of transgender athletes. It's a joke, but it's like a non-issue to me. It's not a part of my life. Like, nobody I know has little girls who are trying to compete athletically and the division's getting dominated by a trans athlete, you know what I mean? Like, I don't see it in the real world. Like, I just see it digitally, but like, I'm not gonna get hyped over it. Like, I saw the other day Joey Diaz was like, man, hyped over it. Like, he was flipping out over it. Like, is it something he's seen in his real life? You know what I mean? If not, I don't know if he should be getting that hyped over it. You know what I mean? I don't think we should be feeding it that much energy. But my main concern is where the topic of discussion should be, and that's are these surgeries covered by insurance? I don't give a fuck what somebody does to their body, and I don't give a fuck what they do to their kid's body as long as everybody consents. But it shouldn't be covered by insurance, and if it is, then it's a major problem. And then something Dr. Phil said that caught my attention. He said more kids than ever are graduating high school and can't read to a 12th grade proficiency or something like that. And like, obviously Rogan was alarmed. Like, I call bullshit that kids are graduating high school and they can't fucking read, because that's how he made it sound. Maybe kids say can't properly interpret Romeo and Juliet, but I bet everybody graduating high school could read at least well enough. Right now, I probably can't technically read to a 12th grade proficiency level. If I could, I probably wouldn't have to do so many cuts on this fucking podcast. But like, here's my point. Earlier in the discussion, Dr. Phil did the whole families don't even talk at the dinner table anymore because everyone's just staring at their phones. Like, he did that whole thing as if in the 1990s, the average family in America was having stimulating dinner conversations, and then smartphones came along and ruined it. But here's the $1 million question. What the hell are these kids looking at on their phones if they can't fucking read? Are they just like looking at pictures? Because my theory is smartphones have kids reading at younger ages than ever, and I bet there's less people than ever who can't read. I don't think that's a thing anymore, not being able to read, excluding extreme situations and like people with learning disabilities. I think everybody growing up in this era could read because of smartphones. Anyone who has a smartphone could presumably read the text. And kids look at smartphones younger than ever these days. You have to think that that's helping out kids read. And Dr. Phil said globally we're ranked in the 30s academically behind other countries in reading and math. And obviously it was like a major cause of concern amongst him and Rogan. But What the fuck does that even mean, and how much does it really matter? Geniuses will still be geniuses whether or not the basic population sucks at math. We all have calculators in our phones. When I think about what the problems in America are today and where they stem from, it never comes back to I think we're just not good enough at math. But what is funny is as I was drawing up this episode, the kid in HEB had to manually apply a discount for me, and he had to do 28 cents plus 28 cents, and he stood there for like mad long. I thought his fucking head was gonna explode, yo. I didn't want to like show him up and like tell him how much it was, so like I just let him figure it out, and then like eventually he was like, it's 66 cents, and then I was like, dude, I'm pretty sure it's 56 cents. But it's not just him and today's children that suck at math. When I was growing up, I thought everybody was retarded because of how many people can't do basic math, but I question how much that fucking even matters. So first off, I don't think it really matters whether or not our population excels in reading and math, as long as everyone, generally speaking, could read and do basic math. And then the other thing is, I don't really care how we stack up against other countries scholastically. If you don't like what you see in America, I can guarantee you it's not because we're falling behind other countries in reading and math. I think the problem in America is everything is absolutely fucking controlled by money. It creates a society that quote unquote shovels air. Everyone's working, but nothing productive is necessarily getting accomplished, but nobody cares as long as everybody's making money. Everybody might as well be shoveling air. So that's why I call it shoveling air. And if everything revolves around money and not necessarily doing productive work, then all of a sudden you have a whole fucking society that's doing unproductive work. Today, if like an 18-year-old kid says that their goal is to buy a house, they're going to be told that they should either get an education or start a business, when the advice to that person should be to learn how to do construction. That should be the easiest path to home ownership, doing construction. And it's easy to reward, because if you do construction work that's equivalent to more than the house that you're taking away from it, then you've contributed more than you've extracted into our pool of residency. You know what I mean? So if everybody's doing construction work and everyone else is doing work that revolves around construction work, then we're going to have enough construction for everybody, and everybody's not going to have to do bullshit ass work to pay for the cost of a roof over their head. If we could just build the roofs over their heads. If you trace back the roots, I think the problem always comes back to investment culture. Your society has a problem when people start getting wealthy off of investing. Unless obviously you're investing to grow a productive company, but that's rarely the case today. But ultimately, I think reallocating our labor into productive work like construction, agriculture, and manufacturing is the solution, opposed to improving in reading and math. It should be construction, agriculture, and manufacturing, and any jobs that revolve around that. And during that Dr. Phil episode, Rogan mentioned how COVID shut down 70% of restaurants, and Rogan's talking like it's a tragedy that all these restaurants shut down. And obviously, like, I do feel bad for anybody who lost their business, but the excessive amount of restaurants is a part of the problem. And COVID exposed that you could operate with basically no foundation, but you can make just enough money to stay afloat. So because of that, there's way too many restaurants right now open in America. It is absolutely fucking shocking how many restaurants exist. I would say the typical town in America probably has on average like 10 Italian restaurants and 5 Chinese restaurants. It's absolutely out of control. I had this epiphany once when I was living back in Jersey and I was getting bubble tea. There's a shop that sells bubble tea in like almost every shopping plaza in New Brunswick. It's nice to be able to get bubble tea so easily, but is it really necessary to have so many of them in one area? Like, is that really a good allocation of labor? The food service industry has grown exponentially to where it should be. It's a reflection of the problem. Everybody's wasting their labor doing a job that's essentially spinning your wheels in circles if the ultimate goal of work is progress. If you work in a restaurant, then you're basically shoveling air. Restaurants exist for one reason, and it's because all parties involved need to make money. Nobody is there by choice. Working in restaurants sucks out your soul. Decreasing the amount of restaurants in America would not be a bad thing, and no one in the history of the universe probably enjoys eating out more than I do, but it's not good for society to have so many restaurants open. Traditional service in restaurants should be reserved for fine dining. Casual dining restaurants like the Cheesecake Factory could so easily move to kiosks and food runners. Every table in a restaurant doesn't fucking need a personalized server, and it's starting to evolve into rent a friend, because that's what it is. In most states, you only have to pay the servers $2 an hour, so why the fuck would the restaurant want to get rid of the server? So what they want to do is they want you to basically be buddy-buddy with the table, and you're there to provide mental support to a broken human being, like to a broken couple a lot of time, because a lot of time you're doing it for like a couple, like an old married couple. That's what I realized. I was like, I'm like the third wheel at their fucking dinner tonight. Like, that's what they're trying to make me. But the large majority of commercial food restaurants should shift to a model similar to Chipotle or Cava, where like it's like a line of fresh ingredients, and you order your base, then you order your meat, then you order the vegetables, then you get it topped off with sauces. Like, all those places are good food. Or like another type of situation that I like, but like unfortunately you still have to tip in these other places. Like, I like Cava Chipotle because you're not required to tip there. But in like these other places where like you order at the counter and you get a number, like you're still doing the credit card thing. You still do that at Chipotle also. You do that everywhere. You know what I mean? We need to get away from that shit. We need to get rid of service so that we're not tipping everywhere. We don't need to have tipping at every fucking to-go register. You know what I mean? But the point is to move to more counter type place where it's you order at the counter and you get a number and then you sit down and they know based on your number where to bring the food. Like, I like those type of establishments also, but emphasize the food opposed to catering to people. And then one last thing I want to make note of from that Dr. Phil episode. Dr. Phil said that there was like an estimated 500 million years of life lost in the children's lives from like intellectual loss because of school shutting down for 2 years because of COVID. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't buy that shit for 1 second. I don't think that's tangible or quantifiable. When we're talking about life expectancy, lifestyle choices going forward are going to trump any kind of intellectual loss from being homeschooled for 2 years. Not to mention like scientific breakthroughs that might happen throughout these children's lifetime. There's so many factors going into how long today's children's lives may last. I refuse to believe it's tangible that 2 years of homeschooling during COVID will shave years off their life expectancy, and they know it's going to be about 500 million years. Like, that's fucking bullshit, yo. That's a fucking guess based on the way they create data. You know what I mean? Like, do I think that they got that number a real way? Yeah. Do I think that number's absolute fucking bullshit? Yeah, I do think it's absolute fucking bullshit. Honestly, Dr. Phil is so much cooler when it's actually Adam Ray, which bridges me to something else I want to mention, because Adam Ray is the worst offender of what I'm about to get into. And there's nothing I hate more in stand-up than this. It is unquestionably the most hack shit that any comic could do. It is so fucking unacceptable. I don't know how comics get away with it or why they think it's funny and do it in the first place. What's your name and what do you do for work? That shit needs to be removed from stand-up comedy. That is not humor. The comic always grabs the low-hanging fruit, but even if the comic flips it well, it's still not funny because they turned me against them once they took it there. Once you ask those stupid fucking questions, I'm rolling my eyes and I don't want to hear what comes next. When a comedian does that shit, it legit makes me want to boo them. But like 6 months ago, Adam Ray must have done like a promotional campaign on social media because he flooded my timeline with clips of him doing that shit. Like, Rogan thinks everything is mad organic. I'm telling you, I don't think anything is fucking organic, yo. If you ask me, I think everything is fucking manufactured, yo. And I have a lottery theory that every once in a while, something organic surfaces. Why? Because people hit the lottery, you know what I mean? Something organic will surface just like somebody's gonna hit the lottery. But like 6 months ago, Adam Ray, he must have done like a promotional campaign because he flooded my timeline on social media with clips of him doing that shit. And it's not like I follow Adam Ray, so it must have been a promotional campaign that got him in my feed. But like every clip he posted posted was him doing that shit. So I just thought he was like the corniest dude ever. And then when Tony had him on a guest for Kill Tony, I was like disgusted. I was like, oh, that guy's the worst. But then he was like actually mad funny as the guest, even like when he was himself. And like, I'm not usually like judging guests whether they're funny or not, but you could stand out and be exceptionally funny to me. Or you could kind of like embarrass yourself, like by trying too hard to make jokes and not being funny. You could do either or. But if you just chill and play the cut, I don't judge you, you know what I mean? Like, but the point is, I liked Adam Ray as a guest even when he was himself, and like now I fucking love Adam Ray. Like, I think like he's better than that. Like, I can't believe he did that fucking corny ass, the gay ass crowd work. And like, he actually does do a good job with those 2 questions in the clips, but it's still trash to me because of what he's doing. Like I said, even if you flip it well, it's not funny. Once you ask those 2 questions, it's over. But I just had to go on this rant because I just saw a comedian post a clip on their Instagram from their special, and they did that in their special. And not only did they do that on their special, but they chose that clip to represent their special. And I know comedians don't like to post their actual material online, so they post their crowd work instead. But if we're talking about somebody's special, then you're already posting it up as content, so you might as well post the best of the best, you know what I mean? Like, if you're posting it digitally, it doesn't matter whether you post a bit, you know what I mean? Once it's digital, you put it out there to the universe anyway, you know what I mean? Like, and then related because of Kill Tony, but unrelated news, Hans Kim just said on Kill Tony that he used his ex-girlfriend's credit card and ordered like $200 worth of DoorDash. First he said he accidentally did it, but then he said he did it on purpose, like he did so hoping that she would be forced to contact him and he'd be able to get her back through that. I could literally do a whole episode analyzing what I think about that, but I'm not going to get into it. I will say though, I'm no expert on girls, but I don't think that's going to work. And then Rogan has this thing where he says you've never lived unless you've killed on stage. And I disagree with that. I think you've never lived until you've gone to a Manic episode. But I think a lot of stand-up comedy crowds are corny as fuck, basic ass woke people sitting at the edge of their seat waiting to either laugh or be offended. Generally speaking, the people who frequent comedy clubs are the people I don't even want to make laugh. But I'll rephrase Rogan's statement to, you've never lived until you bang down a game-winning shot in an important game. And like, it doesn't matter what sport it is. The kid on NC State just did it. He banked in a crazy-ass 30-foot shot to put the ACC Conference Tournament semifinals game into overtime, which they went on to win, and then they won the championship, securing a bid into the NCAA tournament, which they would not have gotten if that kid didn't hit that shot and they didn't win that game. That shot was everything to that team. There were seniors on that team whose basketball career was saved by that kid hitting that shot. Together as a team, everything they worked for that season was saved by that kid banking in that crazy shot. He's been forever immortalized by his teammates, the ones who he was in the trenches with, doing the dirty work with. If that kid could hit that shot for anyone in the world, he would choose those 10 kids because those are his teammates. Those are the ones he's gone to war with. In a world where it's tough to find purpose, those moments have more value than people realize. Those are the moments that bridge people together and live forever amongst that group of people. And the importance of that specific game makes it so easy to understand the magnitude of that shot, but you could scale down the level of competition exponentially. If it's a group of kids that worked hard together as a team and that game is of importance to them, a big game-winning shot could live forever amongst them. But that must be the best feeling in the world, whether it's a game-winning shot in basketball, a goal in soccer, a goal in hockey, or like a walk-off home run, or just like a walk-off hit in baseball. Like, to just have the game-winning hit when you're part of a team, I think is like a special feeling. And I think that that's the ultimate. Now I want to talk about some retarded shit that I heard Rogan say the other day on his podcast. It's starting to get to a point where I'm actually questioning whether Rogan might be on a spectrum, and if Rogan actually is special needs, then I feel bad calling him the R word. Rogan's heart's always in the right place, but he's just totally out of touch, and if he sounded like this 10 years ago, I would have never started listening to the podcast in the first place. He was talking about how terrible it is that a child who commits a crime could go to jail for almost their whole life because they're still mentally undeveloped when they committed the crime, and a lot of them come from terrible households. But what he said that was retarded was we should factor in a child's upbringing when determining punishment for minors convicted of crimes. Like, that sounds like a fucking great idea. Going forward now, when people are plotting an armed robbery and one of them is on the fence about doing it, the other person could just be like, dude, it doesn't even fucking matter. My dad's abusive and you come from a single mother household. We could just say that in the court and we won't do any time. Like, coming from a broken household can't be a get out of jail free pass, and you can't use it as an excuse to lighten somebody's sentence. And I'm taking this hard stance against violent crimes. You know what I mean? Like, if there's no victim, then obviously I'm not pro keeping juveniles in jail for an extended period. You know what I mean? I'm basically talking about murder. That's the one place where I draw the line on. Was it a violent crime and was there a victim? That's the question. But the thing is, in that conversation, Rogan had referenced a 16-year-old that he went to high school with who killed another kid in a DUI. That to me is different. You know what I mean? DUI deaths to me is the biggest gray area in the criminal justice system and morally. I totally differentiate it from premeditated murder. I don't care how old you are or what type of household you come from. If you're unequivocally found guilty of first degree murder, you should do the rest of your life in jail. Anyone who's guilty of cold blood murder, I don't think should ever get out of jail. But I personally don't habitually drive drunk, nor am I in a position now, or will I ever really be going forward, where I have to drive drunk. But I've done it enough times that I would never judge somebody who kills a person in a DUI crash. As terrible as it is, it's a mistake and it's an accident. I could have done it even if my driving was fine. Something around me could have happened, causing a deadly collision, and if I'm intoxicated, it doesn't matter whether the crash technically was or was not my fault. The blame will fall on me, and I'll go down as killing somebody in a DUI crash. And I think that, like, a kid's upbringing has to be like a non-issue when dealing out punishment. You can't give a kid less time because he had a bad upbringing. But I do agree with Rogan's rhetoric when he was talking about dishing out punishment for kids who haven't fully developed mentally in instances of death by DUI. Unless they're like a habitual offender or totally out of control, I emphasize with anybody who killed somebody in a DUI, but even more so when you're talking about a 16-year-old kid. One horrific decision leaving some stupid party will ruin that kid's life forever. If anybody deserves a second chance in life, this is the exact situation, even though it's an inexcusable mistake. Plus, the burden of living with that on their conscience is almost punishment enough. And on the opposite spectrum of feeling bad for a 16-year-old kid who drove drunk, I served tables one season on Fort Myers Beach, and those old people are fucking disgusting. They all drive around during happy hour bar hopping with total disregard of who's driving. I've served tables where they were all sloppy drunk when they came in. They all drank a few drinks and then they left and went to another bar. It didn't matter which of them was driving. They were all wasted. And there's nothing I hate more than how responsibility for that could fall on the server or the restaurant. Like, it shouldn't be my fucking responsibility to gauge how drunk somebody is or how much they've drank and potentially cut off a guest at my table. If you ever want to start a fight with somebody, cut them off at your table. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to get into it with people. You cut somebody off, like, yeah, you're gonna get into it, and I don't like getting cut off. Like, I don't know how the fuck this person got there, and if I'm the guest and I'm Ubering home, I don't want some server cutting me off because he's deemed I've had enough. Like, I hate cutting people off as a server, and I would hate it if my server cut me off. Like, I just don't like the idea of cutting people off. People need to be responsible. If I own a bar, I'm serving you on the assumption that you're not getting into a fucking car and driving when you leave here. Like, how am I going to tell you you've had too much to drink when you might be Ubering home? And I personally believe that when you sign your driver's license, you should agree to breathalyzers without a probable cause. A cop should be able to sit outside of a bar when it lets out and pull over any car that it wants just to make sure that the driver isn't drunk. Cops should have the right to breathalyze any driver they want at any time. If you told me I have to agree to random breathalyzers if I want to drive, I don't think that's a breach of my rights. Cops should have that right, and they should trade it off with what they currently do, which is the right to turn traffic stops into investigations for whatever the fuck they want. That's what they shouldn't be allowed to do. It shouldn't matter if a cop pulls over a car and sees that the driver is a known drug kingpin. Address the traffic violation and investigate for potential DUI, but cops shouldn't be using traffic stops to get probable cause to search a car and try to make an arrest, unless like the car reeks like drugs or you see something in plain sight. And because of like how convenient ride shares, it's made it harder than ever to rationalize driving drunk. When I was younger, ride share didn't exist. There was times when I was trapped at a party because nobody was allowed to stay the night where we were, and I had no other way to get home other than drive, and I was just like, fuck it, I'm going for it. And that's why I find it crazy how many celebrities these days, specifically athletes, still get DUIs. It's absolutely nothing for them to pay for a rideshare ride home and back in the morning to pick up the car. It's beyond irresponsible for them not to do it, as long as they could easily get the ride and if they're wealthy. The only reason I could think of celebrities and athletes like they wouldn't want to do a ride share late at night is because they don't want to be like recognized. But if that's the case, then they could just hire a private driver if they're that famous. But I was thinking all this when Patrick Mahomes' pops just got arrested not that long ago on a DUI. And then like really recently, I just heard Shannon Sharp and Ocho Cinco talking about it because Richard Sherman apparently just got a DUI. And what Shannon Sharp said, it literally shocked me. He was like, you know why these people drive drunk? And I was at like the edge of my seat waiting to hear the reason. And he goes, it's because they need people to see them pull up in the whip. That right there is absolutely fucking crazy to me. It's been like high school since I gave a fuck about how I looked when I pulled up in the whip. And I guess it's because I don't like pull up places anymore and I don't like have a nice car. But Richard Sherman's retired. It's not like he's a rookie. I could see like some rookie getting excited to pull up in his first nice car. But at what point does the novelty of having nice cars wear off for somebody like Richard Sherman? And like what's ironic is like I'd personally rather be Richard Sherman, professional athlete, and pull up as myself in a hoopty than be Joe Schmo who pulls up in some Lamborghini. Like, I would rather have Richard Sherman status than a luxury brand car. To me, status trumps materialism, specifically when you're an athlete, because that means that you're physically inclined. So that means that you're a superior human being, in my opinion. And I think status trumps materialism for most people. I think most people are more impressed by a celebrity than a nice car. And then something trivial, but I want to make note of. I heard Rogan all alarmed on another podcast because they asked elementary school kids what they want to be when they get older, like as a career, and like a shocking amount of kids said an influencer. I do think that's an alarming answer, but like, does it really fucking matter? And it's just a reflection of the current state of society, what we're introducing to these children. But I see it as this, like, why the fuck are we even asking kids what they want to do as a career? Kids shouldn't even be thinking about that shit. How many people ended up in the job that they picked on career day in elementary school anyway? When I was younger, kids all said they want to be fucking police officers and firemen. And now kids are all saying they want to be influencers. Like, does it really matter? Choosing influencer is probably more realistic than the shit kids were saying when I was younger. Micro-analyzing elementary school career days is exactly what I was talking about before. It's just like a social distraction. And then keeping along the lines of social distractions, but this is more real to me. I think Rogan would personally scoff at subconscious racism or just like subconscious biases, but I'm going to use something he said to prove a point that it actually is a real thing. His comment is the epitome of what I see from my vantage point. Being black means you don't get the benefit of the doubt. You got to prove yourself. But Rogan was talking about Kimbo Slice on the podcast, and he was like a good dude. He wasn't like a thug or anything. Like, I bet Rogan never prefaces it that way when he's talking about Tony Hinchcliffe or Tom Segura. He's not saying surprise like, yeah, they're not thugs or anything. They're actually really nice guys. So if he doesn't preface it that way for Tony and Tom, then why does he preface it that way for Kimbo Slice? And the answer is obvious. It's because if you look a certain way, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. You got to win people over. And I'm guilty of it too. I subconsciously stereotype people to the point where I notice it consciously. But because I'm aware of it, I don't use that word, quote unquote, thug, when I'm talking about a black person who has like hood vibes. I talked about Richard Sherman before. He was 100% right back in the day when he went on like his post-game rant and he got called a thug. And he was like, we all know what that's a code word for when he called me thug. And I undoubtedly agree with him. It sounds absolutely gross when a white person calls a black person a thug. If you call a black person a thug, you might as well just call them the N-word with the hard R. And it's something I had noticed it before Richard Sherman said it, and then he aired it out publicly. And like I said, I'm not better than thinking it, but that's why I believe in subconscious biases, you know what I mean? I don't think outright racism is as prevalent as one side makes out to be, but I think subconscious biases are much realer than the other side makes out to be. And in white people's defense, there is a reason why that's plugged into our programming. Exhibit A is 99% rap music. Stereotypes exist for a reason. And as I was working on this, I did a delivery from CVS. I needed help, and there was a black kid who was working, a totally non-threatening looking kid. I didn't assume that he quote unquote might be a thug because he was black. It's a certain aura, and we all know it when we're around it. Like, not to sound racist, but if you want to have an honest conversation, you know what I'm saying. But somebody could have subconscious racial biases and not be an outright racist person. It's okay to have racial biases. And I bet black people are racially biased towards white people. I bet, generally speaking, black people don't trust white people. It's exactly what I was saying before, how black means you don't get the benefit of the doubt. The same goes with the black person trusting a white person. Generally speaking, a white person has to prove to a black person that he's trustworthy, just like a black person has to prove to a white person that they're not a thug. And then a controversial perspective I have, but the Trip of a Lifetime podcast is a safe space for the truth, so I say whatever the fuck I want here. On this podcast, I heard Rogan discussing the numbers of how many girls have been drugged at parties, and surprisingly high. It's like 70% of girls say they've been drugged at least once. But Rogan was baffled when he was talking about it. He said, very often the girl just wakes up in her bed and the person who drugged her never like came to collect or anything. I wonder why that is. I don't know whether he didn't want to say the quiet part out loud or he just doesn't realize. But what percentage of those girls literally just blacked out off of alcohol and jumped to conclusions and assumed that they were drugged when they weren't actually drugged? If someone wants to tell me that that's not what's happening, are you going to try to tell me that's never the case? There must be at least one girl who thought she was drugged even though she wasn't, but will never actually know the truth. Even if most cases are real, isn't there like a decent chance that those numbers are at least slightly skewed? And I'm not accusing any of the girls of outright lying. I just think sometimes they don't realize they just blacked out of alcohol. I started making spicy margaritas in my apartment and they're fucking banging as hell. I'm hooked as a motherfucker. Now, is it like my favorite thing to drink right now? But it's my favorite thing to do. It like brings me to my happy place. It's really all I have in my life right now to look forward to on a daily basis. If I know I'm drinking margaritas at night, it's all I think about all day when I'm driving around. I get so excited to get to it. I try to do as much driving as quick as possible to get off the road and start working on the margs as quick as possible. The problem is I want to drink margaritas every night, but I limit myself to 2 nights a week. But the thing is, they're so banging that I end up drinking like 6 of them in 2 hours, and there's 3 shots in each margarita, and because of that, it hits me mad quickly. But it's crazy. 1 second, I'm just watching whatever game I have on, and next thing you know, I'm just waking up in my bed not remembering anything. And I always think, oh shit, I never fucking cooked my dinner last night. This has happened on multiple occasions. Like, it happens every single time. I go into the kitchen and I see, oh shit, I did cook my dinner last night. It just happened one night as I was working on this episode. It's crazy. I'll see all the dirty dishes, but I have absolutely no recollection of cooking or eating dinner. And the punchline is, if I was some dramatic 20-year-old white girl and I woke up like that after a night of partying, I would just assumed I got slipped something. I wouldn't have been lying. I just would have been mistaken. And then similar content so it bridges well. Chris D'Elia just did his soft white underbelly interview, but it's got to be the most cringeworthy interview in the history of the universe. I can't believe how bad he came across. It was really hard to watch, but that's what made it so compelling. But like, first off, here's my hot take. Chris D'Elia is not a fucking pedophile, and people sound retarded when they call him one. I don't know the technical definition, but pedophilia is being attracted to prepubescent children. Jerry Sandusky, along with with the suspects on the To Catch a Predator show, those are all pedophiles, but Chris D'Elia is not. A 41-year-old man trying to coerce an 8-year-old child into sexual activity is totally different than a 41-year-old man trying to have consensual sex with a 17-year-old girl. One situation is morally wrong and the other one is socially wrong. I agree that in our society, a 41-year-old man shouldn't be trying to have sex with a 17-year-old girl, but there was points throughout human history when people didn't walk around with IDs. And if you're not willing to admit that girls are sexually attractive by 17 years old, then you're not willing to have honest conversations. Women literally get surgery to try to look how they did back when they were 17 years old. And I don't know what Chris D'Elia did or didn't do, but if he was being predatory to underage girls in DMs on social media, then he's undoubtedly wrong, but he's not a pedophile. In fact, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. People think Chris D'Elia is the sick one, but the truth is it's society that's sick, and a reflection of it is the word MILF. It's a lot more normal for a 41-year-old man to be attracted to a 17-year-old girl than a 17-year-old boy to be attracted to a 41-year-old woman. But the society's so sick that they had to kick it up one notch from Chris D'Elia. It's one thing to call a 41-year-old man a pedophile for potentially trying to hook up with a 17-year-old girl, but now they're calling a 19-year-old a pedophile for hooking up with a 6-year-old girl talking about Josh Giddey. Unless said person molested a child, how is a 19-year-old a fucking pedophile? It doesn't make sense. Josh Giddey was probably a senior in high school when that girl was a freshman. That's a normal thing for a freshman to hook up with his senior. When it happens in real life, you don't hear kids chirping like such and such hooked up with a freshman. What a fucking pedophile. And a freshman in high school still hasn't fully developed yet, whereas Josh Giddey undoubtedly hooked up with a girl that's fully developed and who by anybody's standards I bet is hot as fuck. The age difference between Josh Giddey and the girl he hooked up with is less than that of most marriages. Josh Giddey hooking up with that girl should have been a non-issue, but we live in a sick society, so now his reputation is forever tarnished. And I think it's like the most ridiculous shit ever that people call him a pedophile, but now like even I associate his name with being a pedophile because like once you get tagged to something publicly, like it sticks with you. Moving on, but sticking with the theme of NBA players, Bronny James just fell out of ESPN's mock draft, and LeBron tweeted criticizing the concept of mock drafts like, can't we just let them all be kids? But it just makes me roll my eyes because when LeBron was a senior in high school, then I bet mock drafts were probably fine because he was the number one pick everywhere. Back then, I bet LeBron wasn't taking a stand against mock drafts. And between then and now, the internet has fully emerged. So like obviously mock drafts will be more prevalent than ever. But that just ties it to the next point I want to make. Because in LeBron's defense, his tweet wasn't made because Bronny fell out of the mock draft. That's what I thought it was initially. His tweet was made in response to Brian Windhorst's tweet that Bronny fell out of the mock draft. Brian Windhorst tweeted that Bronny fell out of the mock draft. So therefore, LeBron has a point, like you shouldn't be posting negative press about kids. You could post the mock draft, but you shouldn't post when players fall out of the mock draft. But LeBron knows what it is. This comes with the circus that is his existence. In 2024, with the multi-millions of dollars and insurmountable fame, comes the over-scrutiny. And when you're talking about Bronny as an NBA draft prospect, he's fair game. It's not like it's out of bounds to critique him as a player. And the tweet only happens to LeBron's son. They're not singling out some random college player for dropping out of mock drafts. Everybody loves shitting on Bronny and saying he's not good enough to play in the NBA, but in my opinion, Bronny lived up to the hype of being LeBron's kid. He's really good at basketball and is borderline an NBA player. If he carved out his own identity as like a relevant NBA player, then he'd be exceeding the hype in my opinion. But we live in a sick society, so everybody's online saying Bronny's trash when he's a trillion times better at basketball than they'll ever be at anything in their life. If you weren't good enough to get minutes on your high school basketball team, then you sound stupid as fuck on NBA draft prospects trash. And then the final topic I want to hit on is I want to build on something that Rogan and Duncan Trussell were recently pondering because it's something that I have a strong opinion on. They were talking about borders and immigration and they were like, what's the solution? Because you can't just let everybody in. But I have a simple solution that works here in America if you have a system to make sure that nobody's faking documentation. It's a simple principle. You could move to a bordering country and work on a work visa. Anyone living in Mexico or Canada should be able to apply to jobs in America, and if they get hired, they qualify for a work visa and they could legally move here as temporary residents, just like I should be able to move to Canada or Mexico and temporarily live there on a work visa if I got hired on a job. Me personally, I feel like I should have the right to get a job in a restaurant in Mexico or Canada and move there legally, but I shouldn't be able to do that in England. Like if I want to move to England, it should have to be for work that's like worth relocating me for. But if I want to move to Mexico or Canada to serve tables, I should be able to do that. I fundamentally feel different about moving to another country on a work visa for people who live in bordering countries opposed to countries on other continents. There should be more leniency when dealing with your next door neighbors, in my opinion. But what's happening right now in America is a fucking farce. The large majority of hotels and restaurants knowingly hire illegal immigrants with fake documentation, and we turn a blind eye to it. But America's way of life literally relies on this labor force. We need that. Why not just create a legal process for them to come work here and live as temporary residents? And all these people would be on a path to citizenship, but in the meantime, they could at least work and live here while they wait for the process to play out. Because people who are like anti-Mexican immigration, their first excuse is, I have no problem with immigration, but just do it legally. But the thing is, these people's lives will pass them by before they get legal citizenship. They probably gotta wait like 10 fucking years for that. They're living in poverty and need immediate employment. I'm so sure they had time to wait to get granted legal citizenship, which they probably won't get granted anyway. But in my system, during the waiting period, they would have already gotten to work and live here. So by the time they're ready to get granted citizenship, they presumably have already learned the language and assimilated to the culture. And what's ironic is like everybody always makes the complaint that illegal immigrants are stealing our jobs. And I've always said that they're working the shitty jobs that nobody wants to work, but we need done for our way of life. But as of late, I've realized they actually are coming and taking my job. People think Kanye West is a genius. I think a lot of the illegal immigrants these days are geniuses. They figured it out. They drive rideshare and do food delivery. They probably can't believe how much fucking money they're making doing that shit. Whenever I'm at a food spot picking up an order, if there's another driver there that's like also picking up an order, they rarely ever speak English. And I used an Uber the other day because I had to pick up my car from the shop and the driver didn't speak English. If you don't speak English and you're working a service job, you're obviously not a legal citizen. But yeah, they're pushing me out of work. Soon I'm going to be homeless and a bunch of Mexican families going to be rich. And I've realized what ICE should be doing. ICE shouldn't be going to like people's residences or places at work. What they should be doing is rounding up all the illegal immigrants begging for money on the street corners. Try to get them to communicate what country they're from and deport them back. If we send them back, we'd be doing them a favor unless like they're like a refugee from a country that isn't safe, which might be the case with a lot of them. But me personally, if I move to another country and I find myself homeless and begging on a street corner for money, then everything got away from me and I deserve and would want to be deported. I thought about this because some homeless lady who like clearly spoke no English stood next to my car the other day when I was at a red light. I didn't pay her any attention, and then when she walked away, she fucking banged on my car with her hand out of anger. Like, that's unacceptable. She deserves for somebody to get out of the car and beat the shit out of her. And since that's talking about homelessness, like, one last thing I do want to say about like homelessness in America, talking about like for American citizens, I don't like how Rogan talks about the homelessness problem in America. The conversation is always what to do about it, when the conversation should be, why is the homeless problem what it is? If you want to figure out the solution, you got to figure out the root cause of the problem. And I can guarantee you the large majority of them isn't because they're lazy. And if we lived in a country with scarce construction, then homelessness would be inevitable. But it's disgusting to have the amount of commercial structures that we have and still have rampant homelessness. You could go to any major city on a night and find homeless people sleeping next to an empty 50-floor building. That to me just like doesn't look right. There's a problem with that picture. Trip of a lifetime. Let's fucking go.